is what's known as a flat or income yield. Very simple calculation. Some investors buy for income. They just want to know what a £5 coupon means as a percentage of the current price today in return terms. So, some investors will just say, thank you, Tim, give me the flat yield, often quoted as the FY in columns in the FT, for example. And they'll say, right, if I take a £5 fixed coupon and divide by the current market price as a percentage, I know roughly what my annual income return is going to be. And here, that's about 4.4%. So if you're purely buying for income, between now and 2014, you can expect a yield based on what you paid of around 4.4%. That sounds pretty good for something backed by the government. And it's almost too good, because I've forgotten something. The problem with flat yield calculations is they ignore this to some extent. They ignore the fact that if I pay 113 today and only get 100 back in 2014, I've lost £13. A second calculation builds that in. It says this is a bit unrealistic. So let's build in an adjustment for the difference between what I pay today and what I'll get back in 2014. Okay, the name of that calculation, it has several names. One of them is the yield to maturity. If you look that up in a sort of newspaper or something, you might see a column headed up YTM. It's also confusingly known as the gross, because it's before tax, redemption yield, or the GRY in brackets. So that gives you a clue, it's this second calculation, and in practice it's a bit fiddly. I have to get into the time value of money, recognising that a pound today is worth more than a pound next week and next year. So I'm going to do a very quick and dirty calculation. If you try this at home and then go to the FT, you won't get the same answer as the FT. And that's not a problem, because most people just look the number up. But let's have a quick go at what it means, and what does it tell me, and why is it not 4.4%? And here's the answer. Basically what it says is, actually, Tim, what you need to do is recognise you're going to lose £13 over roughly 4 years, depending on exactly when the government planned to buy this thing back. So, back of an envelope calculation, bit rough and ready. If I were to take the £13 and divide it into 4 chunks, that's for the 4 years, I reckon I'm looking at basically a £3.25 capital loss every year. So I could say I'm going to lose around £3.25 on this thing every year. Bit rough and ready, but around £3.25. And to turn that into a yield to maturity, all I need to do is the following. What I could do is say, right, roughly speaking, I get a £5 coupon, I lose £3.25 as a sort of capital loss every year, and I want it as a yield, as a return on my original investment. So I could say the true yield to maturity, that's this thing, the YTM, is more like 1.5%. Which isn't much. In other words, factor in the income and the capital loss every year, and my total return for holding this thing until it matures in 2014, just 1.5%. And you might think, well, that's not much, that's rubbish. And indeed it is quite low, and actually the real yields to maturity on government bonds are low at the moment. US treasuries, around 2% or something similar. So why are people buying them? The answer is security, safety. These are issued by government, so the one thing you do know is, although the yield's low, the issue is not about to go bust. And actually, quantitative easing too is designed to get people out of these things to some extent. The Fed wants to buy IOUs in the US, push people out of them and into other investments or into lending the money that's freed up elsewhere. So one of the aims of quantitative easing too is basically the Fed buying up US treasuries from the people that hold them, the primary dealers, the banks and so on, so that those banks can take the money and stick it somewhere else. Perhaps into corporate bonds, perhaps into new loans to individuals and companies.